Jiho Kim stood at the edge of the transport platform, looking up at the biggest building he had ever seen. The structure stretched so far into the sky that he could not see where it ended. Glass and metal twisted together in patterns that hurt his eyes when he tried to follow them. This was Nexus Prime University, the most famous school in the galaxy. He picked up his single bag and walked toward the main entrance. Around him, creatures that looked nothing like humans moved in groups. Some had too many arms. Others floated in the air without touching the ground. A few looked like walking trees with eyes that glowed blue. Jiho had studied pictures of different alien species before coming here, but seeing them in person made his stomach feel strange. The entrance doors were 3 times taller than any door on Earth. They opened without making a sound as Jiho approached. Inside, the ceiling was so high that small clouds formed near the top. Hundreds of different species walked, crawled, or flew through the massive space. Their voices created a buzz that reminded Jiho of standing near a waterfall. "You must be the human," said a voice behind him. Jiho turned around and saw something that looked like a walking crystal. It was shaped like a person but made of clear blue stone that caught the light and threw rainbows across the floor. 2 bright white lights served as its eyes. "I am Professor Talon Vex," the crystal being said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "I teach advanced quantum mechanics. You are in my class." "Yes, sir," Jiho said, bowing slightly the way his mother had taught him to show respect. "I am Jiho Kim from Earth." Professor Vex made a sound that might have been laughter. "How quaint. Humans still use physical gestures for social interaction. Follow me, young primitive. Your classmates are eager to meet their first human." They walked through halls filled with students. Jiho noticed how they all stared at him. Some pointed, with whatever they used for fingers. Others made sounds that were probably their version of whispering. A few took pictures with devices that looked nothing like the cameras on Earth. "Tell me, human," Professor Vex said as they walked, "what level of quantum mechanics education do you have?" "I finished my 2nd year at Seoul National University," Jiho replied. "I studied basic quantum theory, wave functions, and particle behavior." "Basic," Professor Vex repeated. "Yes, that sounds about right for your species. We will try to find something simple enough for you to understand." They entered a classroom that was bigger than most buildings on Earth. Curved rows of seats stretched up toward the ceiling like the inside of a giant bowl. Students of many different species sat in groups, their conversations creating a noise that sounded like a broken radio trying to find a station. "Class," Professor Vex announced, and the room became silent. "We have a special guest today. This is Jiho Kim, our first human student in over 300 years. A creature that looked like a giant squid with silver skin raised one of its tentacles. "Professor, is it true that humans only discovered quantum mechanics 200 Earth years ago?" "Yes, Myra Keith," the professor answered. "Their species is still very young. We must be patient with them." Another student spoke up. This one looked like a lizard that had learned to walk on 2 legs. Its voice was deep and rough. "I am Corin Thale. I have heard that humans still use chemical rockets for space travel. Is this true?" Jiho felt his face grow warm. "We use fusion drives now for most long-distance travel," he said. "Chemical rockets are mostly for getting off planet surfaces." "Fusion drives," Corin repeated, making a sound that was clearly laughter. "How adorable." A third student joined the conversation. This one was the strangest yet. It looked like it was made of moving fog with tiny lights floating inside. When it spoke, the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I am Zephyr 9 of the Collective. Our species achieved faster than light travel when your sun was still forming. We wonder if you can even understand the math we use here." Professor Vex moved to the front of the classroom. "Enough questions for now. Let us see what our human friend can do." The professor touched a panel on the wall and equations appeared in the air above the class. The symbols looked familiar to Jiho, but some were completely new. "Today we will work on a practical problem," Professor Vex announced. "Design a theoretical engine that can create small tears in space-time to allow faster-than-light travel without using traditional hyperspace lanes." The class began working immediately. Jiho watched as his classmates used devices that projected mathematical formulas into the air. Some students worked alone, while others seemed to share thoughts directly without speaking. the tentacled student. Myra moved her arms in complex patterns, and equations followed the movement of her tentacles. Jiho pulled out a simple tablet from his bag and began to work. He started with basic principles he had learned on Earth, then tried to apply them to the problem. The math was difficult, but not impossible. He thought about how space and time were connected, and how energy could bend the fabric of reality. Around him, his classmates worked with intense focus. Some had been studying this type of problem for decades. Their species had evolved over millions of years to think in ways that made complex math easier. Jiho was just a human who had learned quantum mechanics in a classroom on Earth. But as he worked, something strange happened. Instead of following the same step-by-step approach his classmates used, Jiho found himself jumping between ideas. He would start with one equation, then suddenly think of something completely different. His mind seemed to make connections that did not follow logical order. The other students worked like precise machines, each step leading perfectly to the next. Jiho worked like water flowing around rocks, finding unexpected paths to reach the same destination. Sometimes he would write down an answer before he fully understood why it was correct. Time passed without Jiho noticing. He was lost in the problem, his mind racing through possibilities. He tried approaches that seemed wrong but felt right. He combined ideas that should not go together, but somehow worked when he put them side by side. Finally, he looked up from his tablet and realized the classroom was very quiet. Everyone was staring at him. Professor Vex stood nearby, the lights in its crystal body flashing rapidly. "You have finished?" the professor asked. "I think so," Jiho said. "But I should check my work again." "How long do you think you have been working?" Jiho looked around the room. Most of his classmates were still deep in their calculations. "Maybe an hour?" 47 minutes, Professor Vex said. The professor's voice had changed. The wind chime sound was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. "Show me your solution." Jiho connected his tablet to the classroom display system. His work appeared in the air for everyone to see. The equations were simple compared to what his classmates were creating, but they formed a pattern that was somehow beautiful. Instead of forcing space-time to bend through raw power, his design convinced reality to help with the process. The classroom was completely silent. Even the students who had been working stopped to stare at the floating equations. Myra Keith's tentacles had gone completely still. Corin Thale's mouth hung open, showing rows of sharp teeth. Zephyr 9's internal lights flickered wildly. "This is impossible," Professor Vex whispered. "The mathematical framework is correct, but the approach... No species thinks this way. How did you connect these principles?" Jiho felt confused by their reaction. "I just followed where the math wanted to go," he said. "Sometimes the answer is simpler than the question." Professor Vex moved closer to the display, studying the equations with intense focus. "This solution would work," the professor said slowly. "Not only would it work, but it would be more efficient than anything we have developed in 10,000 years of research." The other students began to whisper among themselves in languages Jiho could not understand. Some sounded excited, others sounded worried. A few sounded scared. "Human," Corin Thale said, his rough voice very quiet. "Where did you learn to think? Like this?" "I did not learn it anywhere," Jiho replied honestly. "This is just how my brain works when I solve problems." Professor Vex turned away from the display and looked directly at Jiho. The lights in the crystal body were flashing so fast they almost looked like solid beams. "Class is dismissed," the professor announced. "I need to make some calls." As the students filed out of the room, Jiho heard them talking in worried voices. He gathered his things slowly, wondering if he had done something wrong. Maybe his solution was incorrect after all. Maybe he had embarrassed himself on his first day. But as he reached the door, Professor Vex called out to him. "Human," the professor said. "Jiho Kim." "Yes, sir?" "Be very careful who you show that kind of thinking to. What you just did? It will change things, whether you want it to or not." Jiho left the classroom feeling more confused than ever. Had just solved a homework problem. How could that change anything? He had no idea that within hours, news of his solution would reach the highest levels of galactic government. He did not know that species across the galaxy would soon be asking dangerous questions about human intelligence. He could not imagine that his simple homework assignment would start a crisis that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. All Jiho knew was that he had solved a math problem, and everyone seemed very upset about it. The message reached Dr. Yuna Vel at 3 in the morning. Ship time. She woke from her meditation cycle to find her communication device flashing with urgent priority signals. As the head of theoretical physics at Nexus Prime University, she rarely received emergency calls. Most physics problems could wait until regular business hours. Dr. Vel unfolded her 6 legs and stood to her full height of 3 meters. Her insect-like body was covered in smooth green plates that reflected light like mirrors. Large compound. Eyes made up most of her head, allowing her to see in directions that most species could not imagine. She had been the leading expert in quantum mechanics for over 2 centuries. "This better be important, Talon," she said as she activated the communication link. Professor Vex's crystal form appeared as a hologram in her quarters. The blue lights that served as his eyes were flashing rapidly, which meant he was either very excited or very worried. "Yuna, you need to see this immediately," he said without any greeting. "I have a student solution that makes no sense." "A student made an error in their homework?" Dr. Vel replied, irritated. "You woke me up for a grading problem?" "This is not an error," Professor Vex said. "This is a perfect solution to the dimensional breach problem, written by the human exchange student, in 47 minutes. Dr. Vel felt her legs lock in place. The dimensional breach problem was considered impossible for undergraduate students. Most graduate students needed weeks to produce even a partial solution. The few who managed a complete answer usually took months of careful work. "Send me the file," she said. The solution appeared on her personal display screen. Dr. Vel's compound eyes moved independently as she read through the equations. Her specialized brain could process mathematical concepts faster than almost any other species in the galaxy. She could spot errors, identify flawed logic, and find hidden connections in seconds. But as she read Jiho Kim's work, her confidence began to crack. The solution was not just correct, it was elegant in a way that hurt to look at. Where other approaches forced their way through mathematical barriers, this one found doorways that should not exist. The human had connected principles from completely different fields of study and made them work together like old friends. "How is this possible?" she whispered. "That is what I want to know," Professor Vex replied. "I need you to verify that I'm not losing my mind. Check the math yourself." Dr. Vel spent the next 3 hours going through every step of Jiho's solution. She used her most advanced mathematical software to double-check each calculation. She called up reference materials from the greatest minds in galactic history. She even consulted with her research AI, which had been trained on 10,000 years of accumulated scientific knowledge. Everything checked out perfectly. More than that, the solution revealed new mathematical relationships that had never been discovered before. Hidden patterns in the structure of space-time that could revolutionize faster-than-light travel. Principles that could be applied to problems far beyond engine design. At 6 in the morning, Dr. Vel called an emergency meeting with the university's senior faculty. By 7, she was standing in front of 20 of the galaxy's most brilliant minds, trying to explain something that should not exist. "The human completed this work without assistance?" asked Dr. Cora Zen, a floating brain in a mechanical body. Her species had evolved past the need for physical forms millions of years ago. "According to Professor Vex, yes," Dr. Vel replied. "No outside help, no advanced computers, no research AI. Just a basic tablet and whatever humans carry in their heads." "Impossible," declared Professor Nix Var, whose snake-like body coiled around his chair. "Humans have only been studying quantum mechanics for 2 centuries. My species has been working on these problems for 50,000 years. And yet," Dr. Vel said, "the solution is here, perfect and complete." She displayed Jiho's work for the group. The room fell silent as 20 brilliant minds tried to understand what they were seeing. Several professors began working through the math on their own devices, hoping to find some hidden flaw. "The approach is completely wrong," said Dr. Mel. "Tox, a creature made of living metal. No rational species would attempt to solve this problem using such chaotic methods. But it works," Dr. Vel pointed out. "Wrong or not, it produces the correct answer." How did the human think of this? Asked Professor Yik-Sul, whose gaseous form swirled nervously in its containment field. What thought process could lead to these connections? Dr. Vell had been wondering the same thing. She had studied human psychology as part of her xenobiology training. Humans were known for their unpredictable behavior and emotional decision-making. Most species considered these traits to be evolutionary mistakes that held humanity back. "I think we need to speak with the human directly," she said. 2 hours later, Ji-Ho Kim sat in the faculty conference room surrounded by some of the most powerful minds in the galaxy. He looked very small compared to the alien professors, and very young. His dark hair was messy from sleep, and he kept looking around the room with wide eyes. "Please do not be nervous," Dr. Vell said, trying to sound reassuring. "We simply want to understand your solution to yesterday's problem." "Did I do something wrong?" Ji-Ho asked. Professor Vex seemed upset. "Not upset," Professor Vex corrected. "Surprised. Your solution is unexpected." Dr. Vell activated the room's display system and showed Ji-Ho's work. "Can you walk us through your thought process? How did you decide to combine these different mathematical approaches?" Ji-Ho studied his own equations for a moment. "I guess I just tried to think about what space and time would want to do naturally," he said. "Instead of forcing them to bend, I looked for ways to convince them to help." "Convince them?" Dr. Corazen's mechanical voice carried a note of confusion. "Space and time are not conscious entities. They cannot be convinced of anything." "I know," Ji-Ho said, "but sometimes it helps to think about math like it has feelings, like it wants to be beautiful instead of just correct." The professors looked at each other with expressions that ranged from confusion to concern. Mathematical beauty was a concept. They understood, but treating equations like living things was completely foreign to their way of thinking. "When you work on problems," Dr. Vell asked carefully, "do you follow a specific method? Do you work through steps in order?" Ji-Ho shook his head. "Not really. I kind of jump around and see what feels right. Sometimes I write down answers before I know why they work." "Before you know why they work?" Professor Nixvar's scaled head tilted in confusion. "How can you know an answer is correct without understanding the reasoning?" "It is hard to explain," Ji-Ho said. "It is like, have you ever had a word on the tip of your tongue? You know the word exists, you know what it means, but you cannot quite remember it? Math feels like that sometimes. The answer is there, waiting for me to find it." Dr. Mel Tox's metal form creaked as he leaned forward. "This is not how rational thought works. Mathematics requires logical progression from known principles to new conclusions." "Maybe for you," Ji-Ho said quietly. "But my brain does not work like that. I see patterns that do not make sense until later. I make connections that seem random but somehow fit together." The room fell silent. Dr. Vell felt something cold growing in her stomach. She had spent her entire life believing that there was only one way to think about complex problems. Logical, systematic, rational. The idea that there might be other approaches, better approaches, was terrifying. "Human," she said slowly, "are all of your species capable of thinking this way?" Ji-Ho considered the question. "Some better than others," he said. "But yes, most humans think in patterns instead of straight lines. We are good at seeing connections between things that seem unrelated." "And your educational system," Professor Yik-Sul asked, "does it teach these pattern recognition methods?" "Not exactly," Ji-Ho replied. "We learn normal math and science, but we also learn to trust our instincts and try new things. My teachers always said that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to try something that seems impossible." Dr. Vell felt the cold feeling in her stomach spread to her entire body. If what this human was saying was true, then everything the galactic academic community believed about intelligence was wrong. They had spent millions of years perfecting logical, systematic thinking. They had evolved away from chaotic, intuitive approaches because they seemed inefficient. But what if chaos was not inefficient? What if it was actually a more powerful way to understand the universe? "We need to run some tests," she announced to the room. "Give the humans some additional problems to solve. See if this was a lucky accident or something more." Over the next 3 hours, the faculty presented Ji-Ho with increasingly difficult theoretical problems, questions that would normally take their best graduate students weeks to answer. Puzzles that had stumped researchers for decades. Jiho solved each one. Not quickly, but not slowly either. He would stare at a problem for a few minutes, scribble some notes, then produce a solution that was both correct and completely unexpected. His approaches made no sense to the watching professors, but the results were undeniable. "This is impossible," Professor Nixvar declared after Jiho solved a problem involving 11-dimensional mathematics. His species should not be capable of this level of analysis. "And yet," Dr. Vell said, watching Jiho work on a knot, news traveled fast in the galactic academic community. Within 3 days of Jiho's impossible performance, encrypted messages were flying between universities on 1,000 different worlds. Faculty members who had not spoken in decades suddenly found reasons to contact each other. Research groups that normally guarded their secrets began sharing data and asking strange questions. The message that reached Supreme Academic Chancellor Kale Tor was marked with the highest security codes. As an ancient energy being who had existed for over 50,000 years, Kyle Tor had seen many academic controversies come and go. Most were petty disputes about research funding or publication credits. This message was different. Kale Tor's consciousness expanded across multiple dimensions as he read the report from Nexus Prime University. His energy form, usually calm and controlled, began to flicker with agitation. The words seemed impossible, but they came from sources he trusted completely. A human undergraduate had solved problems that were supposed to be unsolvable. Not just one problem, but dozens. Not through luck or accident, but through some kind of thinking process that other species could not understand or duplicate. "This requires immediate investigation," Kyle Tor decided, his voice echoing across several planes of existence at once. Within hours, he had assembled an emergency council of the galaxy's most respected academics. They met in a secure facility that existed partially outside normal spacetime, ensuring complete privacy for their discussions. Dr. Una Vell arrived first, her insect form moving nervously around the meeting chamber. She had brought all of Jiho's work with her, stored on quantum drives that contained more security protocols than most military installations. "Are you certain this is not some form of deception?" asked Dr. Nara Zet when she reviewed the files. As a gaseous being from the nebula worlds, her consciousness existed as patterns of charged particles. She could process information at speeds that made most organic brains seem frozen in time. "We monitored everything," Dr. Vell replied. "No external communication, no hidden devices, no assistance from research AI. The humans solved these problems using only what exists inside his skull." Chancellor Kale Tor manifested his energy form into something resembling a tall, glowing humanoid figure. "If this is accurate, then we have a serious problem. Our entire understanding of intelligence and problem-solving may be fundamentally flawed." "Or," suggested Dr. Rix Calm, a cybernetic being whose mechanical body had been enhanced with quantum processors, "the human is somehow accessing information from sources we cannot detect. Perhaps their species has developed hidden technologies." Dr. Vell shook her head. "We scanned him thoroughly. No implants, no quantum entanglement devices, no exotic matter. He is completely biological, completely natural. What you see is what you get." "That is what makes this so disturbing," Chancellor Kale Tor said. "If humans can naturally perform at this level, what does that say about the rest of us?" The group decided to conduct a public test. If Jiho's abilities were real, they needed to document them properly. If this was some kind of fraud, they needed to expose it before panic spread through the academic community. The announcement went out to universities across the galaxy. The test would be broadcast live, with observers from every major species. Jiho would compete against the galaxy's most brilliant minds in a series of increasingly difficult challenges. Jiho himself knew nothing about the political implications of what was happening. He was enjoying his time at Nexus Prime University, attending classes and making friends with students from different species. The academic challenges Dr. Vell had given him were fun puzzles, nothing more. When they told him about the public test, he agreed without hesitation. "It sounds interesting," he said. "Will I get to meet more students from other universities?" Dr. Vell looked at his innocent expression and felt a mixture of admiration and pity. This young human had no idea that he was about to shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The test was held in the Grand Assembly Hall of Nexus Prime University. The chamber could hold 50,000 beings, but today it was mostly empty, except for the cameras and monitoring equipment. Billions of viewers across the galaxy watched as Jiho walked onto the stage alongside 5 of the most brilliant minds known to science. His competitors were legends. Professor Zell Marn had invented 3 new branches of mathematics. Dr. Quinn Voss had solved the unified field equations that eluded scientists for millennia. Master Yiltox held advanced degrees in 17 different scientific disciplines and had an enhanced brain that could process information faster than most computers. Jiho looked like a child standing next to these intellectual giants. Chancellor. Kael'Tor's energy form appeared above the stage as the test began. The first challenge involves optimizing quantum field calculations for faster-than-light communication. You have 2 hours. The competitors immediately set to work. Professor Zell Marn began constructing mathematical models in 3-dimensional holographic displays. Dr. Quinn Voss connected directly to quantum computers that were more powerful than anything on Earth. Master Yiltox's enhanced brain allowed him to work through thousands of calculations simultaneously. Jiho pulled out his simple tablet and started doodling. The watching academics were confused. While his competitors used the most advanced tools available, the human was drawing pictures that looked like flowers and geometric patterns. Occasionally, he would write down a number or equation, but mostly he just sketched. "What is he doing?" Dr. Narazet asked, her gaseous form swirling with agitation. "I have no idea," Dr. Vell replied, watching Jiho's strange behavior through the monitoring systems. 30 minutes into the challenge, something unexpected happened. Jiho stood up and walked over to Professor Zell Marn's workstation. He pointed at something in the professor's calculations. "I think you made an error here," Jiho said politely. "This variable should be negative, not positive." Professor Zell Marn looked where the human was pointing. His 4 eyes widened as he realized Jiho was correct. The error would have invalidated hours of work. "How did you see that?" the professor asked. "It just looked wrong," Jiho replied with a shrug. "Like a song that is missing a note." He returned to his own work, leaving Professor Zell Marn staring after him in confusion. Similar scenes played out across the stage. Jiho would finish his own calculations quickly, then wander around offering helpful suggestions to his competitors. Each time, his observations were correct. Each time, they came from insights that seemed to have no logical basis. "Mathematical calculations look like songs to him?" Dr. Rixcalm asked, his mechanical voice crackling with disbelief. "He sees patterns that we cannot see," Dr. Vell realized. "His brain processes information in ways that are completely different from ours." When the 2 hours ended, all 6 competitors had produced solutions. The judging panel, composed of experts from across the galaxy, reviewed each submission carefully. Professor Zell Marn's solution was technically perfect but conventional. Dr. Quinn Voss had found an approach that was 15% more efficient than existing methods. Master Yiltox had produced work that was mathematically beautiful and highly practical. Jiho's solution was revolutionary. Not only was it more efficient than any of the others, but it revealed fundamental properties of quantum communication that had never been discovered. His approach opened possibilities for technologies that had only existed in theoretical discussions. "How is this possible?" Master Yiltox demanded, his enhanced brain struggling to understand what he was seeing. "I processed 1,000,000 calculations while he drew pictures. How can his result be superior?" The second challenge involved designing artificial gravity systems for space stations. Again, Jiho's competitors used advanced tools and systematic approaches. Again, Jiho sketched patterns and made intuitive leaps that defied logic. Again, his solution was the best. The third challenge focused on energy storage using exotic matter. The fourth dealt with time dilation effects in high-gravity environments. The fifth explored theoretical approaches to consciousness transfer between different types of brains. Jiho won every single challenge. By the end of the day, the watching academics were in a state of shock. Everything they believed about intelligence, about problem-solving, about the superiority of logical thinking, had been challenged by a young human with a tablet and an apparently chaotic mind. "I do not understand," Professor Zellmarn said after the final results were announced. How do you think? What process do you follow? Jiho considered the question carefully. I guess I try to feel what the problem wants, he said. Like every equation has a personality. Some are shy and need gentle coaxing. Others are bold and want to show off. I just try to listen to what they are telling me. Equations have personalities? Dr. Quinn Voss asked, his scaled head tilting in confusion. Not really, Jiho said, but it helps to think of them that way. Makes the math more friendly. The interview ended, but the implications were just beginning to sink in. Across the galaxy, academics were asking the same terrifying question. If one human could outperform their best minds, what could humanity accomplish with proper resources and training? Dr. Nara Zet was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. Her gaseous form pulsed with worried energy as she spoke to the emergency council. We have been wrong about everything, she said. The broadcast of Jiho's triumph reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. On research stations orbiting distant stars, in underground laboratories on mining worlds, and in the floating cities of gas-giant atmospheres, brilliant minds watched. The same impossible thing happened over and over again. Dr. Hannah Park was working late in her small office at the Kepler Research Institute when the message arrived. At 63 years old, she had spent most of her career being politely ignored by the galactic scientific community. Her work on chaotic harmony mathematics was considered interesting but impractical by alien colleagues who preferred more systematic approaches. The message was from Dr. Una Vell at Nexus Prime University. Dr. Park, the recorded message began, I am writing to apologize. For 20 years, we have dismissed your research as primitive human speculation. After recent events, I realize we may have been catastrophically wrong. Please contact me immediately. We need to discuss your work on non-linear mathematical solutions. Hannah stared at the message for several minutes before playing it again. Dr. Vell was one of the most respected physicists in the galaxy. She had never shown any interest in human research before. Something significant must have happened. By the time Hannah finished watching the broadcast of Jiho's performance, her hands were shaking. She recognized immediately what the young man was doing. His approach to problem-solving was almost identical to the mathematical philosophy she had been developing for decades. Her communication device began flashing with incoming messages, requests for interviews, invitations to conferences, demands for copies of her research. After years of working in obscurity, the entire galaxy suddenly wanted to know what she had been thinking about. On the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Vel Cross was having very different thoughts as he watched the same broadcast. The massive Titan warrior stood over 4 meters tall, his rocky skin scarred from 100 battles. He had built his reputation on strategic thinking and military innovation, but what he saw Jiho do made his blood run cold. Analysis, he commanded his tactical AI. The human's problem-solving methods show clear applications to military strategy, the AI replied in its emotionless voice. Ability to see unexpected connections could revolutionize battlefield planning, weapons design, and defensive systems. If humans can consistently outperform our strategic computers, Admiral Cross did not need to hear the rest. He had fought against humans during the border wars 30 years ago. Back then, human forces had been considered brave but predictable. Their technology was inferior, their tactics were conventional, and their strategies followed logical patterns that were easy to counter. But what if human commanders could think like Jiho? What if they could see solutions that Titan military minds could not even imagine? Send a priority message to High Command, the Admiral ordered. We need to reevaluate our assessment of human military capabilities. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ambassador Woo-Jin Lee was dealing with a crisis that seemed to grow larger by the hour. His office in the Galactic Embassy was flooded with requests from alien governments, universities, and corporations. Everyone wanted something from humanity, and none of them were being subtle about it. Ambassador, his assistant reported, we have received 47 requests for educational exchanges in the past 6 hours. The Zephyrian Collective wants to send 1,000 students to study human mathematics. The Aquarian Republic is offering to build us 3 new universities if we will share our teaching methods. Ambassador Lee rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. What about the military requests? 15 different species want to observe human military training. The Draxian Empire is offering exclusive trade agreements in exchange for access to human tactical thinking. Admiral Vel Cross of the Titan Fleet has requested a personal meeting with our defense minister. This is getting out of hand, Lee muttered. Just 3 days ago, most galactic species had considered humanity to be a minor player in galactic affairs. Now they were treating Earth like it held the secrets of the universe. The truth was, nobody on Earth understood what was happening either. Government officials were scrambling to comprehend why one student solving some math problems had caused such a massive reaction. Dr. Alara Nost was perhaps the only being in the galaxy who truly understood what Jiho's performance meant. As a cybernetic Nexerian scientist, her brain had been enhanced with quantum processors that could analyze information at superhuman speeds. She had been studying cognitive evolution for over 300 years. The implications are staggering, she reported to her research team. Human neural architecture allows for simultaneous processing of multiple solution pathways. Most species evolved away from this capability because it seemed inefficient. But it is not inefficient? Asked her assistant, Dr. Kinzef. It is the opposite of inefficient, Dr. Nost replied. It is the most sophisticated problem-solving mechanism we have ever encountered. While other species think in straight lines, humans think in networks. They can jump between unrelated concepts and find connections that linear thinking cannot discover. She displayed a holographic model of human brain activity compared to other species. The difference was dramatic. Where alien brains showed orderly, sequential patterns of thought, human brains looked like fireworks exploding in all directions. For millions of years, she continued, we have assumed that organized, logical thinking was superior to chaotic, intuitive thinking. We have been wrong. Chaos allows for true innovation in ways that order cannot match. So humans are naturally more intelligent than we are? Dr. Zeph asked. Not more intelligent, Dr. Nost corrected. Differently intelligent. We optimized our thinking for efficiency and predictability. Humans retain the ability to think in ways that seem random, but are actually highly sophisticated. They can solve problems that we cannot even understand. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the Galactic Research Council. They wanted Dr. Nost to lead an emergency investigation into human cognitive capabilities. The request came with unlimited funding and the highest priority. Clearance. They are scared, Dr. Nost realized. The entire galactic academic establishment is terrified that everything they believe about intelligence is wrong. Back at Nexus Prime University, Jiho was completely unaware of the chaos his simple homework assignment had caused. He was sitting in the cafeteria with his new friend Mira Jin, another human student who was studying xenobiology. People have been acting strange around me lately, Jiho said, picking at his lunch. Professors keep asking me weird questions about how I think. Yesterday, 3 different research teams wanted to scan my brain. Mira nodded sympathetically. I know what you mean. My xenobiology professor used to ignore me completely. Now she wants me to explain how humans approach biological classification, like there is something special about the way we organize information. Maybe there is, Jiho suggested. I mean, we do seem to solve problems differently than everyone else here. Have you noticed how alien students work through things step by step? They never seem to make intuitive leaps. I thought that was just good discipline, Mira replied. But you are right. They follow very rigid patterns. When I suggested alternative approaches to studying ecosystem interactions, my professor looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Yuna Vel, who approached their table with obvious nervousness. The imposing insect academic looked strange, trying to appear casual. I hope I am not disturbing you, she said. I wanted to speak with both of you about your studies. Of course, Jiho replied politely. Is there a problem with our work? Quite the opposite, Dr. Vel said, settling her large form into a nearby chair. I have been reviewing human academic performance across multiple disciplines. The patterns are remarkable. She activated a small holographic display showing academic records. Human students consistently produce solutions that our faculty do not expect, not just in mathematics and physics, but in biology, engineering, philosophy, even art and literature. You approach every subject from angles that other species do not consider. Is that bad? Mira asked. It is revolutionary, Dr. Vel replied. For example, your recent paper on symbiotic relationships in multi-species ecosystems. You identified patterns that our xenobiology experts had missed for decades. Your approach to categorizing life forms reveals connections that linear taxonomic systems cannot capture. Mira looked surprised. I just followed what seemed logical to me. I looked for relationships instead of just differences. That is exactly the point, Dr. Vell said. What seems logical to humans often seems impossible to us. You see unity where we see separation. You find connections where we see isolation. The professor leaned forward, her compound eyes reflecting the cafeteria lights. I need to ask you both a difficult question. Do you believe that all humans think the way you do? Jiho and Mira looked at each other before answering. Pretty much, Jiho said. I mean, some people are better at math than others, and some are better at art or sports. But most humans I know can make those kind of intuitive connections you are talking about. We learn to trust our instincts, Mira added. Our teachers always told us that if something feels right, it might be worth exploring, even if you cannot explain. The recruitment wars began quietly, but they spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within 2 weeks of Jiho's public demonstration, every major university in known space had established human studies programs. Species that had never shown interest in Earth suddenly found urgent reasons to visit the solar system. Dr. Sunho Kong, Earth's newly appointed Minister of Galactic Education, stood in his office looking out at a sight that would have been impossible just a month earlier. Alien spacecraft filled the sky above Geneva, each one carrying academic delegations, military observers, or corporate representatives. The steady stream of visitors had overwhelmed Earth's spaceports and forced the government to establish temporary landing zones in the Swiss Alps. Minister, his assistant announced through the intercom, the Andromedan Academy is offering to triple their previous proposal, full funding for 10,000 human students, plus research grants totaling 50 billion galactic credits. Dr. Kang sighed and added the offer to the growing pile on his desk. Similar proposals arrived every hour. The Crystalline Confederation wanted exclusive access to human mathematical thinking. The Void Dwellers were offering to share their space-folding technology in exchange for human engineering students. Even the mysterious Watchers from the Galactic Core had broken their 1,000-year silence to request cultural exchanges. What about the military requests? He asked. Getting more aggressive. Admiral Vel Cross of the Titan Fleet has requested a meeting with President Nam for the 3rd time this week. The Zephyrian Collective is offering planetary defense systems in exchange for access to human strategic planning methods. Dr. Kang rubbed his temples. The situation was spiraling out of control. Earth had gone from being a barely noticed backwater world to the center of galactic attention overnight. Everyone wanted something from humanity, and they were willing to pay increasingly desperate prices for it. The problem was that nobody on Earth really understood what made human thinking so special. They had always assumed that the way humans solved problems was normal. Finding out that it was actually revolutionary had caught everyone off guard. Meanwhile, at Nexus Prime University, the situation was becoming chaotic. Professor Yuki Tanaka had arrived from Earth 3 days earlier to study the phenomenon firsthand. As a human evolutionary biologist, she hoped to understand why human brains had developed differently from other species. The key is environmental pressure, she explained to a packed auditorium of alien academics. Earth is what we call a death world, a planet with unusually high levels of environmental stress, extreme weather, tectonic activity, aggressive predators, frequent extinctions. Humans evolved to survive in constantly changing, unpredictable conditions. Dr. Yuna Vell, sitting in the front row, raised one of her 6 arms. How does environmental stress lead to superior problem-solving abilities? It forces cognitive flexibility, Professor Tanaka replied. Species that evolved on stable worlds could rely on predictable, logical thinking patterns. Humans had to develop minds that could adapt quickly to new situations, make connections between unrelated events, and find creative solutions when conventional approaches failed. A gaseous being in the back of the room pulsed with agitation. Are you suggesting that our stable evolutionary environments made us less intelligent? Not less intelligent, Professor Tanaka corrected. More specialized, your species optimized for efficiency and accuracy in known situations. Humans retain the ability to handle unknown situations through what we call controlled chaos thinking, the audience murmured uneasily. The idea that chaotic environments might produce superior cognitive abilities challenged everything they believed about evolution and intelligence. But surely, interrupted Dr. Mel Tox, his metallic voice ringing through the auditorium, logical, systematic thinking is more reliable than chaotic intuition? Professor Tanaka smiled. That depends on what you are trying to accomplish. If you want to perfect existing solutions, systematic thinking is better. If you want to discover new solutions that nobody has imagined before, chaotic thinking gives you access to possibilities that logic cannot reach. She displayed a holographic model showing different types of neural networks. Human brains maintain multiple parallel processing streams that can work on different aspects of a problem simultaneously. This creates what appears to be random thinking, but it actually allows for complex pattern recognition across seemingly unrelated data sets. In simple terms, she continued, humans can see connections that other species cannot see, because our brains never fully specialized in linear thinking. We kept the chaos, and chaos turns out to be a feature, not a bug. The implications of her research were spreading beyond academic circles. In corporate boardrooms across the galaxy, executives were scrambling to understand what human cognitive abilities meant for their industries. CEO Zhao Zet of the Galactic Mining Consortium was reviewing reports from his science division when the significance hit him. If humans can see patterns that we miss, he told his board of directors, they might be able to identify resource deposits that our surveys overlook, or find more efficient extraction methods, or solve logistical problems that have been limiting our operations for centuries. Similar conversations were happening in every major industry. Transportation companies wanted human help with route optimization. Energy corporations hoped humans could revolutionize power generation. Even entertainment conglomerates were interested in human creativity and storytelling abilities. But the most significant changes were happening in education itself. Jihye Seo, a human graduate student in xenopsychology, had been quietly working on something that would reshape how the galaxy thought about learning. She called it intuitive integration methodology, and it was based on a simple observation. If other species could learn to think more like humans, they might be able to access some of the same cognitive flexibility that made human problem-solving so effective. The key is not to abandon logical thinking, she explained to Dr. Ilara Nost during their research collaboration. The key is to add chaotic thinking as a parallel process. Teach students to follow logical steps while simultaneously exploring intuitive connections. Dr. Nost, her cybernetic brain humming with processing power, was fascinated by the concept. You are suggesting that we can teach organized minds to become partially disorganized? Partially flexible, Jihye corrected. Human children learn both systematic problem-solving and creative exploration. They are taught to trust their instincts while also verifying their conclusions through logical analysis. It is not chaos or order. It is chaos and order working together. The first experimental classes began the following week. Alien students from dozens of species participated in educational programs designed to incorporate human-style thinking methods. The results were immediately apparent. Students who had struggled with creative aspects of their studies suddenly began producing innovative solutions. Research projects that had been stalled for years made breakthrough progress. Even basic mathematics became more accessible when students learned to feel the patterns in equations rather than just calculating them. But not everyone was celebrating these developments. In the military headquarters of the Draxian Empire, General Kos Var was studying intelligence reports with growing alarm. If humans can teach their thinking methods to other species, he told his staff, then every military force in the galaxy will soon have access to human-level strategic capabilities. Our advantage in military technology means nothing if every enemy commander can outthink our battle computers. What do you recommend? Asked his aide. We need exclusive access to human military advisors, General Var replied, before our enemies get the same advantage. Similar strategic thinking was happening across the galaxy. The revelation of human cognitive abilities had triggered what historians would later call the Great Scramble, a desperate competition among galactic powers to secure access to human intellectual resources. Back on Earth, President Hyejin Nam was dealing with diplomatic crises that multiplied daily. Her office had become a revolving door of alien ambassadors, each making increasingly aggressive demands for access to human citizens. "The situation is becoming untenable," she told her cabinet during an emergency meeting. "Half the galaxy wants to recruit our people, and the other half sees us as a potential threat. We have gone from being ignored to being the center of galactic politics in less than a month." "What are our options?" asked the defense minister. "Limited," President Nam replied. "We can try to manage the situation diplomatically, but we are dealing with species that have been playing galactic politics for millions of years. Some of them are starting to make demands that sound more like ultimatums." The pressure was taking its toll on human society as well. News of humanity's unexpected intellectual superiority had created a mixture of pride and anxiety on Earth. Some people celebrated the recognition, but others worried about the attention it was attracting. "We are like a small country that suddenly discovered it has the world's largest oil reserves," one political commentator observed. "Everyone wants to be our friend, but not necessarily for good reasons." Meanwhile, at Nexus Prime University, Jiho was discovering that academic fame came with unexpected complications. He could no longer. 5 years after Jiho Kim walked into that fateful classroom, the galaxy had become a very different place. The young man who had once been just another exchange student now stood before the Galactic Academic Council as the youngest being ever, appointed to the position of Professor Emeritus. His simple tablet had been replaced by advanced alien technology, but his approach to problem-solving remained refreshingly human. "Today marks the completion of the Cognitive Integration Project," Jiho announced to the assembled representatives from 847 worlds. "After 5 years of collaboration, we have successfully developed teaching methods that allow any species to access basic human-style intuitive thinking." The audience, a mix of crystalline beings, energy entities, mechanical constructs, and countless other forms of life, listened with attention that would have been unimaginable before the Great Humbling. These were some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and they were hanging on every word spoken by a human who was barely 30 years old. Dr. Yuna Vel, now Director of Interspecies Cognitive Research, raised one of her 6 arms. "What success rates are we seeing in the pilot programs?" "Better than we hoped," Jiho replied, displaying holographic data above the assembly. "Students who complete our intuitive integration courses show an average 40% improvement in creative problem-solving abilities. More importantly, they begin to see solutions that their species had never considered before." The statistics were remarkable, but they told only part of the story. The real revolution was happening in research labs, engineering firms, and government buildings across the galaxy. Problems that had stalled scientific progress for millennia were being solved by mixed-species teams that combined alien knowledge with human-inspired thinking methods. On the mining world of Kepler 438b, an engineering team led by human graduate, student Woojin Park had solved a resource extraction problem that had puzzled the Galactic Mining Consortium for 3 centuries. By applying controlled chaos thinking to geological surveys, they discovered deposit patterns that traditional analysis methods had missed entirely. "The key was not looking for what we expected to find," Woojin explained to the consortium's board of directors. "We looked for what felt wrong, what seemed out of place. Human intuition helped us spot anomalies that systematic scanning overlooked. The new approach had increased mining efficiency by 60% and opened access to resources that were previously considered unreachable. Similar breakthroughs were happening in every field where humans applied their unconventional thinking methods." Dr. Mina Oh, now director of the Galactic Innovation Initiative, stood in her office aboard the massive research station orbiting Earth's moon. Through her window, she could see construction ships from dozens of species working together to build humanity's first interstellar university campus. The Sol Consortium for Advanced Learning was becoming the most sought-after educational destination in known space. "Status report on current projects," she requested from her AI assistant. 73 active research initiatives across 47 worlds, the AI replied. "Human-alien collaboration teams have achieved breakthrough results in faster-than-light communication, dimensional engineering, biological life extension, artificial gravity manipulation, and consciousness transfer protocols." Each of these achievements represented problems that had seemed impossible before human thinking methods were applied. The galaxy's accumulated knowledge, filtered through human cognitive flexibility, was producing innovations at an unprecedented rate. But perhaps the most significant change was happening in the realm of interspecies cooperation itself. Dr. Jihye Seo's work on cultural integration had created new diplomatic frameworks that were revolutionizing galactic politics. Traditional diplomacy relies on logical negotiation between clearly defined interests, she explained to the Galactic Council. Human-inspired diplomacy looks for connections between seemingly incompatible positions. We find solutions that satisfy needs nobody knew they had. Her methods had successfully resolved trade disputes that had lasted for centuries, prevented 3 potential wars, and established cooperative agreements between species that had never been able to work together before. The secret was treating diplomatic problems like mathematical equations, looking for elegant solutions that seemed impossible until someone found them. Meanwhile, Jiho himself had become something more than just an academic success story. His teaching methods were being studied and replicated across the galaxy, but he remained focused on the practical work of solving problems and helping others learn to think in new ways. The most important thing we have learned, he told a group of new students from the Andromedan galaxy, is that there is no single correct way to think about problems. Logical analysis is powerful, but so is intuitive pattern recognition. Systematic approaches are valuable, but so is creative chaos. The best solutions usually come from using all of these methods together. His classroom had become a pilgrimage, destination for academics from across the galaxy. Beings who had spent centuries perfecting their logical thinking now came to learn how to embrace intellectual uncertainty and creative confusion. But how do you know when an intuitive solution is correct? Asked a crystalline student whose species had evolved beyond the need for non-rational thinking. You test it, Jiho replied simply. Intuition gives you possibilities to explore, not final answers. The trick is learning to trust your instincts enough to investigate ideas that seem crazy, while still being careful enough to verify that they actually work. This philosophy was reshaping scientific research across the galaxy. Instead of following rigid methodologies, researchers were learning to combine systematic investigation with creative exploration. The results were spectacular. Breakthrough discoveries were happening at 10 times the previous rate. On Earth, the changes were just as dramatic. What had once been a minor player in galactic affairs was now the intellectual center of known civilization. Human cities hosted research teams from hundreds of species. Earth's universities had become training grounds for the galaxy's future leaders. President Hyejin Nam, now in her second term, reflected on the transformation during a cabinet meeting in the expanded United Nations building in Geneva. 5 years ago, we were worried about being ignored by galactic civilization, she said. Now we are worried about managing our influence responsibly. The recruitment requests are still increasing, reported the Minister of Galactic Affairs. We now have formal partnerships with over 300 worlds, and more applications arrive daily. What about the military implications? Asked the Defense Minister. Complex but manageable, the President replied. Human strategic advisors are working with allied fleets. But we have been careful to maintain balance. No single species gets exclusive access to our military thinking methods. This balance had been crucial to preventing the kind of arms race that many had feared. By sharing human cognitive abilities broadly, rather than exclusively, Earth had avoided becoming a prize to be fought over by competing galactic powers. The transformation had not been without challenges. Some species struggled to adapt to human-inspired thinking methods, finding the cognitive flexibility too alien to their evolved mental patterns. Others worried that adopting human approaches would somehow diminish their own cultural identity. But for most of the galaxy, the benefits far outweighed the difficulties. Civilizations that had been stagnant for millions of years were experiencing Renaissance periods of innovation and discovery. Problems that had seemed permanently unsolvable were yielding to new approaches that combined human intuition with alien expertise. As Jiho stood in his office at Nexus Prime University, looking out at a campus now filled with mixed-species research teams, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. It had all started with a simple homework assignment that he approached the only way he knew how, by listening to what the math was trying to tell him. Professor, his assistant announced. "You have a call from the Galactic Research Council. They want to discuss the next phase of the Consciousness Integration Project." Jiho smiled as he accepted the call. The Consciousness Integration Project was humanity's most ambitious collaboration yet, an attempt to understand how different types of minds could work together more effectively. If successful, it would create new forms of collective intelligence that combine the best aspects of multiple species' cognitive abilities. "Professor Kim," came the voice of Chancellor Kale Tor, his energy form flickering with excitement across the communication link. "We have approval for the project. 100 billion galactic credits in funding, research facilities on 20 worlds, and volunteers from every major species in the galaxy." "When do we start?" Jiho asked. "Immediately," the Chancellor replied. "The galaxy is eager to see what humans will teach us next." As the call ended, Jiho looked out his window again at the bustling campus below. Students and researchers from hundreds of worlds worked together on projects that would have been unimaginable just 5 years earlier. Human thinking methods had not replaced alien approaches. They had enhanced them, creating new possibilities that neither humans nor aliens could have achieved alone. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most advanced solution was the one that seemed